Hi, I'm Mary Poplin with Imagine Your Systems, and today we're going to show you a day for night conversion with Adobe After Effects, Mocha Pro, and Sapphire 10. In the first part of this tutorial, I will use Mocha Pro's plugin inside of After Effects to track the sky in the car. This will then be used for sky replacement, color correction, and to drive some unique stylized headlight looks. Then I will show how Mocha's tracking and masking data interacts with Sapphire plugins for creative options. We will cover Sapphire 10's new Luna filter for realistic moon generation and touch on Sapphire Builder and advanced effects. The real point is that when you have the tracking, masks, and Sapphire tools at your disposal, you can really quickly make creative decisions. Alright, so here's the steps we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to color correct the car. In this case we're using Lumetri. And we're going to use the hue, saturation, and brightness to darken the sky. We're going to use the SFX clouds in order to create some stars and Luna to create a moon so that we end up with this. We're going to matte out our stars using a quick keyer. We're going to add some artificial headlights to the ground using Mocha masks. We're going to add a quick vignette to darken the edges. We're also going to show you how to create some really awesome lens flares using the S lens flare, which auto tracks according to your lighting. And we're going to darken the windshield using a Mocha mask. So here's our before and here's our after. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to color correct the foreground, and then we're going to color correct the background. We do those separately because we're going to need a lot more darkness and contrast in the background, and of course the foreground should always be lighter. In daytime it's the opposite, the foreground is darker and the background is lighter. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select Sapphire's hue, saturation, and brightness and drag it and drop it right onto our timeline. We're going to do a hue shift to a more blue color, and we're going to take our brightness down a little bit. Now this is a good place to start, but I really need to adjust the curves. So I'm going to type in curves, and we're going to use the After Effects color correction curves. We're going to bring our overall shot brightness down, and we're going to bring our highlights down and a little bit of our shadows up to decrease the contrast. And then we're going to adjust our curves on the R, G, and B channels and our overall curves to get the color we want. I'm just going to make these adjustments very quickly and move on. So now I'm going to duplicate this layer and I'm going to turn this into my car layer and keep an original so that I can compare the two. So this is really nice for my nighttime, for my foreground, but I need to make this background a lot darker. We are going to duplicate, and we're going to call this foreground car. We're going to call our background BG Sky. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my masks, and in After Effects I'm going to make a quick and dirty mask right around my sky. And let's actually pull this up because I need to feather it quite a bit. And now we're going to do the same type of color correction using curves, only this time we're going to knock the sky back. Now you may wonder, why are we converting this to a blue tone? Well, that actually has to do with the way light interacts with darkness and water and things like that. As you lose light, you lose the beginning part of the light spectrum. So it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Alright? So the first color you lose is red, followed by orange and yellow. That's why when it's nighttime you mostly see greens and blues. You don't see a whole lot of warm colors. Of course, you can also use a traditional colorist tool like Lumetri, and you can perform any color corrections that you need. For instance, by taking the exposure down, taking the contrast down, and you can use color wheels to change the overall colors. It all depends on what tools you're most comfortable with. Alright, let's get back to our comp. So we're going to select our BG Sky, twirl our masks down, and we're going to add a little bit of feathering to this mask. Now I can adjust my matte however I like. So there's before and there's after for my sky. I feel like I want that to be just a little bit darker. So we're going to go back to RGB and we're going to pull this just a little bit darker in our curves. So now beautiful night sky and foreground car. Since there's more light in the foreground, we actually have a little bit more green in the foreground. So here's where stuff gets interesting. Now we have to segment this car up into headlights, we have to darken the windshield, we have to track the background so that we can add some stars, and so we can add a moon in there, and we have to add a vignette. Now, the way we're going to do that is we're going to first track our original layer. So we're going to select our original layer, and we're going to come over here to Mocha Pro. We're going to drag Mocha Pro and drop it right onto our timeline. Now, because this is the plugin, we can actually launch Mocha Pro and it will read our original footage from our timeline, and we can start to track this. I'm going to track a couple of different things. The first thing I'm going to track is the front of the car for headlights. We're going to call this front car track. The next thing I'm going to track is this windshield, just like that. We're going to call this windshield. And the next thing I'm going to track is going to be actually these clouds here in the background. So we're just going to drag the shape right around these clouds, and again, that is enough texture for Mocha to track. We're going to turn our thumbnails off. We're going to turn shear off when we track that because we actually just want to track translation, scale, and rotation. And we're going to call this sky track. Now, it's very important that we don't track shear and perspective on the sky, because if we actually turn shear and perspective on, what Mocha is going to do is it's going to try to find that data where it doesn't exist. I just need the position, scale, and rotation. So we turn those off. For the windshield and for the front of the car, we're going to leave it on. I'm going to select all three of these layers. The reason I do that is so I can see my surface tool. My surface tool actually tells me what the track is doing, and the shapes are where my tracks are looking. Since I can animate the shapes will not actually denote an accurate track. This is vital when you need perfect tracking data. We're going to go ahead and hit track forward. And you can see that Mocha is hanging on nicely to everything in our scene. Now, do you see how our background shape is tilting? That's important. It's because it's actually reading this tree. So we're going to correct that. And this is what I mean by the shape will lie to you. We can animate this shape and keep tracking. And look, the track does not actually move. And again, we want to avoid trees. So we're going to pull this data in and keep tracking. So there's our sky track. Here's our windshield track. And here's the front of our car track. The next thing we're going to do is draw a shape around the inside of our headlights. We're using Add to X-Spline to make both of these shapes on the same layer. Now here's the thing I like about X-Splines. We can simply relax for curves and pull tight for corners. So we're going to relax for a nice round curve on our headlights. We're going to name this Headlights Round. And now what we're going to do is we're simply going to link this to the front of the car track, just like that. And so now they're going to follow our car really nicely. Now the other cool thing I can do is I can duplicate this layer, and now we can move our headlights down to the ground, and I can start to flatten them a little bit. From here, I can select Pick Edge, and I can pull my edges out from my headlights. What this will do is this will give us a nice feathered mat for our headlights, but obviously this is a little bit more flat than I'd like. So we're going to select these edge points and pull them out just like this. And so now when we turn our mats on, we can see our objects. Now if you're wondering how I shifted those, I hit Command, and you can actually skew your roto shapes. So there's our nice skewed roto shapes for our headlights. And let's call this Headlights Ground. And we're going to save this, and we're going to close it. Now it's important to save our projects, and that's because the Mocha file is actually embedded into your After Effects file. If you want to save a copy of this Mocha file, you can go to Export Project and save this as a roto car, for instance, and save that right into whatever your project folder is. Save and close, and now it's back applied to our original layer. Alright, so we've got our BG sky, foreground car, and our original layer. Now we're going to add some stars and a moon to our sky, and we're going to do that by going to Layer, New, Solid. Let's just make a good black solid, and let's call this Moon and Stars. Hit OK. We're going to go to our Effect. We're we're going to go to Sapphire Builder, Sapphire Effect, and we're going to build a night sky effect. So we're going to click Load Preset, and our presets are going to load in the preset browser. I'm going to select Background and then type in Star. Now you can see that we have tons of presets that all have the word star in them. So you can search by keywords. These have already been made, so I'm going to select Starry Night. And I feel like that's a little too big, so we're going to use distant stars instead because we have a far away background. We're going to hit Load, and now let's hit Edit Effect. And this is going to give us the opportunity to add more effects to this. So the next effect I'm going to add is Luna. Now Luna is a Sapphire 10 effect. We're going to drag and drop this right into our tree. For those of you that are used to After Effects, you might not be used to nodes. That's okay, they're real easy. Here's your source. Here's the clouds that are actually the effect that make these stars. Here's Luna, and we have all of our parameters right over here on the right. We can even do some simple compositing with backgrounds and masks. But I'm going to select Luna. And I'm going to actually load a preset right inside of Luna. So let's load presets. I'm going to pick, let's do a hazy moon. And hit load. Now I'm also going to change the lunar phase. So let's actually just make this a full moon. Let's take our brightness down a little bit. Let's take our contrast down. And now we have a nice moon for our sky. Let's increase the glow a little bit. And let's increase the glow size a little bit. We can add a little bit of outer softness. And let's see how this fits in the sky. I feel like that's way too big. If you look at my stars, they're the size of my solid. And the moon is really huge for that frame size. So we're going to bring this down to 0.033. Maybe just 0.33. Let's try 0.1. And let's move our moon to a nicer location. I think I'm still going to take this moon size a little bit smaller. So let's take this to 0.05. Let's add a little bit of brighter stars. And let's go ahead and add a quick blur. So let's just drag and drop a blur right into our tree. And let's take the blur amount way down. And that's too much. Alright, just a slight blur on top of our moon. And let's hit OK. So there's my moon and stars. Now I'm going to actually need to scale this up just a little bit and move this around. And the reason for that is because, if you remember, my background is moving around. So when I apply my tracking data, I'm going to need for the moon to not be cut off and my star field to not be cut off. Now we have one more problem here, and that's we can't see our background through this. So let's go ahead and hit Lighten in our blending mode. And one of the things I want you to notice is that this is applied to our entire shot. We're going to fix that. We're just going to simply hit Control Duplicate on our background layer. We're going to come into our effects and presets and type in Key Light. And this is native to After Effects. We're going to drag and drop this right onto our effect. And we're going to pull our white. Let's see what that looks like. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now you see where our car is actually in that too, so we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually select our BG Sky. We're going to select our mask, copy it, and we're going to paste it right onto our background. Now we're going to select Moon and Stars, go to Track Matte. We're actually just going to do a Luma Matte, and that's going to put my stars, my moon, exactly where it needs to be. Now I still feel like my moon is a little too big. So I'm going to select Moon and Stars, and what I want you to see is right here in S Effect, I actually have access to all of my effects that I applied inside of Builder. So we're going to take this size of Luna, and we're going to change the position. This does not move with our background, so we're going to have to remedy that. Let's go to our car layer, and let's select Tracking Data. We want to create tracking data from our sky track. We hit OK, and now you can see inside of our effect we have tracking data, and we can either copy and paste these keyframes or we can link to them using expressions. I'm just going to copy and paste. Let's take our center position, hit copy. We're going to go to our moon and stars, scroll down. We're going to go right into our transforms and position. We're going to paste that data in. And so now that's going to move my sky properly. But you'll see it actually didn't do much for my anchor point. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually move our anchor point until our moon is exactly where we want it in our shot. So there's our moon, and it's being obscured by trees and other background objects. It feels like it belongs in the shot now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our highlights on the ground where our headlights hit. So let's go to Layer, New, and let's do a solid. We're going to select our solid. I'm going to actually pick about the moon brightness, and I'm actually going to change this to more of a yellow tone and hit OK. Because I want the yellow to contrast with the blue, we're going to hit OK. I'm going to select my original layer with Mocha Pro on it, and we're going to copy this and paste it right onto our layer. Inside of mats, I'm going to apply my mats. Now you can see I'm applying only the visible layers, but let's change the visible layers. We're going to change this to headlights ground. Now when we close it, we have our headlights right on the ground. Now I feel like this just isn't feeling like road to me, so we're going to go over here to directional, and we're going to grab directional blur, drag and drop it right on our timeline. We have on-screen controls, so we can start to make that a vertical blur and increase the size as we see fit. We can also increase the feather of our headlights inside of our Mocha mask. The next thing I'm going to do is duplicate this. So we're going to call this ground lights, and we're going to call this headlights. We're going to go take our directional blur and delete it. We're going to go into our mats, select visible layers, only headlights round this time. We're going to take our feathering down to about 15, maybe 30. So there are new headlights on the car. I'm going to change both of these to screen so that we get a little bit of blending on top of our effect. Now I really want these headlights to look like headlights. I want them to feel realistic. Well, Sapphire actually has a really cool effect for that, and it auto tracks. But in order to use it, I'm going to need to tell Sapphire what the headlights are by using the brightness data. So we're going to actually take our headlights. We're going to select our foreground car and our BG sky. We're going to duplicate all of these, drag them above all the rest of our layers. And you can see I have headlights and a car. I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to go to Layer, Pre-Compose. I'm going to move all my attributes into the new composition, and I'm going to call this Headlights Pre-Comp. Hit OK. Now I type in Sapphire Lighting S Lens Flare Auto Track, drag it and drop it right onto our effect. Let's load a preset, and let's type in car headlight and hit load. Now it's not sensing enough of the contrast, so we're going to go into our pre-comp here, go into our headlights. We're going to go to solid settings. We're going to brighten this color, change it to more of a white solid. We're going to go to our foreground car layer and make it a lot darker. Our headlights will auto track because of the contrast. Now this is way too bright, so we're going to take our brightness way down. Alright, and the next thing we're going to do is take our focus point and pull that right off screen, and we're going to take the scale down of this whole effect. Now inside of this effect there's a couple of things I don't like. I don't really like the blue, and I don't really like the hard edges here. So I'm going to go to Edit Lens, and inside of Edit Lens are streaks that are blue, and let's change them to a more subdued color. We're going to take the brightness down on all of these so they're not quite so out of control. And we're going to take our rims down as well. We're going to increase the blur on those. And let's take our streaks and actually bring their width down a little bit, change their height a little bit. So let's hit OK. Now I feel like that's more appropriate to the car that this car is. Now when we hit play, the headlights will track automatically to my car. and that's based on their brightness to the objects around them. Now I still feel like that's a little too bright, so let's change this to lighten, and let's take the opacity down just a little bit so that we still get the detail underneath our headlights. You can also use Sapphire's glow lighting effect. You can adjust the brightness right on your timeline, or you can use any of the presets inside of S-Glow, like neon lights, or dream sequence, low clouds, or even just sunshine. S-Glint can also give you some nice halo effects as well. And again, you can adjust your brightness on the fly using their on-screen controls or parameters, or you can load any preset that you like. So you can see that very quickly I can cycle through a whole bunch of looks and apply those right to my effect. Let's select this one and hit load. And now it's completely changed the look of my highlights. Let's bring those down just a little bit though, because that's way too bright. The key point being, there are tons of tools inside of the Sapphire plugins that allow you to quickly make creative choices about lighting right in your timeline. Now I actually need to darken all these edges and make this feel a little bit more like these headlights belong in the scene. So we're going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and we're going to type in Vignette. So let's take S Vignette and drag and drop it right onto our timeline. I feel like that looks really nice. Knocks down my headlights where it needs to knock them down and makes everything feel like it belongs in the scene. The last thing I need to do is knock down this windshield. So let's take our foreground sky layer and duplicate it because it's much darker. Let's go ahead and take our mask and delete that. You can see our windshield is really dark and matches our sky color. And that's good because you want the windshield to reflect the sky. We're going to go into our car layer. We're going to take our Mocha Pro and launch it. We're going to select our windshield, go to Export Shape Data, select Mocha Shape Data for After Effects, copy that to clipboard, save it and close it, and we can simply select our windshield and go to Edit, Paste Mocha Mask. We can add a feather onto our mask, and of course we can adjust the opacity of the effect itself. Let's drag these actually under the headlights and ground lights, and let's rename this to Windshield. So that's really subtle, but it does a lot for making our car feel like it belongs in the dark. Now when I look at my moon, I still feel like my moon is a little bit too big. So let's select our moon and stars, select Luma, let's take the size of our moon down, and let's make sure just compositionally that it's not aligned with this pole here. We kind of want to make a triangle with these three lights. It's going to really help our composition. And this gives us a good idea of how far we've come with our shot. So now you see how using Mocha Pro inside of After Effects with the native After Effects tools and the Sapphire 10 tools, you are able to do a quick day for night conversion with minimal roto and minimal tracking, even when there's occlusions and reflections, and even when you have to add new elements to the sky. If you have any questions, I am Mary Poplin with Imagineer Systems, and you can visit us at www.imagineersystems.com.